So you're basically helping people how to become arms dealers.
I just got off the banned list, so I can do it again legally.
Today, we sit down with David Packouz, a man whose life is stranger than fiction. From landing a $300 million government contract as a 25-year-old arms dealer to inspiring the blockbuster film War Dogs, David's story is a roller coaster of risk, ambition, and redemption.
Efraim came to me and said, hey, look, I want a contract. It's for rare gun parts. And this was going to the Special Forces in the United States. That was my first contract that I did for weapons. We ended up bidding it at $300 million to supply the Afghan National Army with munitions. But when we inspected it, there were Chinese markings, and we hired an Albanian guy to repackage the ammunition, and about a week later, Costa ends up dead. Federal agents just raided our office. And I was like, oh crap, we're fucked.
And there's a scene in the movie, he's getting some weed, and then he walks back to his car, starts firing in the air. Did that actually happen?
What is true is that we did have machine guns in the trunk.
So you got zero paid out.
Man, I just went from thinking I was going to be set for life, making $15 million, to I'm about to be on the streets. And one of the first things people always ask me is whether the Triangle of Death scene was real. It actually is based on a true story.
Oh, no shit.
I'm not giving anyone advice here how to cover up their crimes. That being said, if you do want to commit crimes...
Dude, Miami is actually really interesting. A lot of really interesting people live here. And on my podcast tour, Miami is the tightest packed with really awesome guests.
Oh.
I don't know why. I don't feel like it's been like that for the last couple of years. I think that's a newer development.
Well, welcome to Miami.
How they say it. Welcome.
Well, after the pandemic, everyone moved here. Yeah.
It's the Florida thing.
Particularly from New York, because everyone was locked down in New York. So all the New Yorkers moved to Miami and all the Californians moved to Austin.
That's right.
Yeah.
Where we were just in Austin.
Oh, yeah.
It was before that. Yeah. And you could literally see it. You could because I've been in Austin on my tour before and I've been in Miami on my tour before. Both cities have double the skyline all of a sudden. All these buildings, or at least some of the buildings, last time I was here was 6 years ago or something. And they were not here. Not as many at least.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I wanted to get you on the podcast personally because I found your story incredibly interesting.
Thank you.
Second of all, War Dogs, the movie, which is based on your real life, is one of my all-time favorite movies. And also because you have a very, very interesting offer right now where you're actually helping people to become government contractors. How many? So the first thing I wanted to ask you is government contractors, does that still include arms dealing?
Oh, absolutely.
No shit.
Yeah.
So you're basically helping people how to become arms dealers.
Well, government contracting is a little broader than arms dealing. Government contracting is the business of selling to the government in general, and the government, every government, buys not just arms, but everything else.
Yeah.
So even if we're talking about supplying the military needs a lot more than weapons or ammunition. It needs uniforms, food, cars, fuel, tents, housing, janitorial services, psychological services. One of our students in War Dogs Academy, where we teach people how to do government contracting, got a contract to provide hypnotherapy services.
No shit.
So literally everything that you could think of, the government buys.
So he himself is a hypnotist?
No, he just hired a hypnotherapist and just brokered the deal. Just like most government contracting, people think, oh, well, why would they buy from you if they could just go to the factory or to the original? And a lot of businesses are not set up to do business with the government. So a lot of big businesses, you'd be surprised, even major corporations, oftentimes they don't want to do business direct with the government because the way the government buys things is it's kind of it's a bidding system. So let's say they want to buy hypnotherapy services, right? They'll put out what they call a solicitation or a request for proposal on their website. These days, the website is sam.gov, like Uncle Sam.
Oh,
right?
Nice.
And you could go type in sam.gov and search for whatever you want to sell to the government and see what requests are out there. And then everyone who's qualified to bid, meaning you have to register with the government and have certain requirements, but we walk through that, how to do that. Then you are qualified to submit a proposal to the government. You say, I'll give you what you're asking for. It'll be delivered at this date. This is the quality. This is the price. And then the government takes a look at all the offers they have and they decide which is the best combination of factors. So in most small contracts, it's usually just who's the lowest price. And usually if you're brand new to the industry, you could win a contract under $250,000 that they don't require any what they call past performance or proof that you've done this business. So it's really just on the lowest price. So you can be brand new, never done this business, and you could win a $250,000 contract with the federal government. And then once you win a few of those, now you have past performance, and now you could bid on the multi-million-dollar contracts.
Damn.
Yeah.
Does that change in any way depending on who's president?
No, I mean, the contracting system is the same. It may change on where they funnel the money, like which, depending on who's president, some may want to funnel more money to the military, some may want to funnel more money to humanitarian services, etc., like that. But I mean, even that, like the United States has a history of just raising the military budget every year. I don't think any president in history has gone down.
Yeah.
Except maybe like at the end of the Cold War, when they were getting rid of a lot of the Cold War era programs, then they reduced the military budget. But in the last like 20 years, ever since September 11th, it's been climbing. The federal government spends twice as much money today as they did when I was in the business in the War Dogs time. Yeah.
What year was that?
Much money. That was I started in 2005 and ended 2008.
Okay.
Yeah.
Damn. How old are you now?
I'm 42.
So you're in 2005. You were 20.
I was 23. I was 22 when I started. About to turn 23. Yeah.
Were you amongst the youngest in that industry? I mean, 22 sounds really fucking.
Yeah. So the funny thing is that my former partner, Efraim, who in the movie is played by Jonah Hill, in real life at that time, he's 4 years younger than me. See, he was 18 years old.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Okay, so and I wanted to ask you that too, just to kind of walk us through roughly of your entire story from regular person to international arms dealer.
Yeah.
You were 22 and it was your cousin, right?
No, he was just a friend.
Okay.
We met in synagogue. But he's like, part of the community in Miami Beach.
And he was 18.
He was 18 when we started working together. Yeah.
And how
he started working in government contracting when he was 16. He started working for his uncle under his uncle's company.
And then he comes up to you and basically says, "Hey, we should deal arms."
He was already doing it on his own. So I'll back up a little. So this was towards the end of 2005. At the time, I was going to school. I was studying chemistry, and I had a few side businesses that I was doing pretty well at. I was a licensed massage therapist, just like they show in the movie. That part's true. But I also had some businesses where I was importing SD cards from China, selling them on eBay. I was also importing bed sheets and towels from Pakistan and selling them to nursing homes and hospitals in the United States. And I was doing pretty well for myself. I think I was about 22, and in about a year, I had made about $100,000, so which is pretty good. All legal.
Yeah.
And, it's not millions, but for my age at the time, it was more than any of my other friends were making, that's for sure.
Yeah.
They were all working flipping burgers and working as waiters and bartenders. And so I thought I was pretty hot shit at the time. And then I bumped into my old friend, Efraim, and we had known each other when we had met when we were like early teenagers. Like he was, I think, 12, I was 16 when we met. Our families both went to the same synagogue. Neither of us liked to pray, so we'd sneak out of prayers and go hang out at the basketball court. That's kind of how we started interacting. When he was 16, he got kicked out of his high school because we both went to private Jewish schools, all boys school, unfortunately. I didn't talk to a girl who wasn't related to me until I was like 17. Yeah, it was very traumatic. I should admit, I was very socially undeveloped at the time. It was a big culture shock. Yeah, so he was going to a private, not the same school I was going to, but similar. And when he was 16, he got caught smoking weed. And back then, they thought weed was the same thing as heroin. They didn't know that. They're like, oh, you're gonna end up on the street in a gang, So his parents obviously freaked out, and the school kicked him out. And his parents told him, well, if you're not gonna take the rules seriously, you're gonna find out what life's really about, and you're going to join the workforce.
Mm.
You know, if you're not gonna respect school. So they sent him off to his uncle, who lived in L.A., and his uncle owns this big pawn shop where they, sell a whole bunch of random things. And one of this is America, so one of the things they sell is guns. And he got obsessed with guns. He was a 16-year-old. Like teenage boys, they get obsessed with like guns, cars, guitars.
We still do.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm 34. I start.
Yeah, exactly. But that's when you like first start developing your identity, and usually teenage guys, they kind of like focus on one thing. And so I was like a musician. I got obsessed with guitars. I wanted to be a rock star. He got obsessed with guns. He became like macho gun guy. So he started selling the guns, and his uncle put him to work as a salesman in the store. He got really good at selling the guns. He learned a lot about them, and started knowing the industry very well. He started buying guns under his uncle's name, online, and selling them and brokering them. And his uncle was bidding on contracts with the state and federal government. So he learned how to do federal contracting and state contracting with his uncle. Started doing contracts under his uncle's name. After about 2 years working together, he claims that his uncle like screwed him out of $70,000 that he owed him. His uncle claims that he screwed him out of that money. They're both well-known scumbags, so I believe them both. And so he quit and he moved back to Miami. And he was 17 when he moved back to Miami, or he was about to turn 18. And so he couldn't do anything under his own name. So he got his dad, who had like a registered company that he wasn't using, AEY Inc. He took over that company, registered it with the federal government under his dad's name, and started bidding on contracts. This was like 2004, right after the invasion of Iraq. So there was like $1 trillion worth of contracts going out as the United States bombed Iraq and then tried to build it into a functioning country again. And one of the things they needed to buy was equipment for the new Iraqi military and police. And so they needed to buy a lot of weapons and ammunition and stuff. And he knew that industry very well. So he started bidding on these contracts, started winning some of these contracts, started doing pretty well. After about a year working on his own, when he was 18, we bumped into each other at a mutual friend's house. And he asked me what I was doing these days. And I told him about the bedsheet business and the SD card business. And he goes to me, he's like, oh, a lot of the stuff you're doing, it's a lot of the skills that you've developed in these businesses could be applied to my business. Kind of similar thing, looking for suppliers overseas, arranging logistics, figuring out licensing and import restrictions and all that stuff. And he's like, but I bet I'm making way more money than you. So you should come work with me. We can make a lot more money together. And I told him, well, I mean, I was like, yeah, you think you're making more money? I made $100K, And I told him, well, how much money have you made? And he goes to me, he's like, I'm going to tell you, but only to inspire you, not because I'm bragging. And he opens up his computer and he logs into his Bank of America account, and he shows me his account. And he had $1.8 million in cash in the bank. And I was like, holy crash. I thought I was doing well, but this guy is made like $2 million in 1 year. I knew
17.
At 17 to 18. Yeah. And I was like, this guy knows something I don't, that's for sure. And so I said, I'm in, teach me what you know. I was like floored.
This money was all just from dealing with guns?
It was federal contracts in general. He won a bunch of contracts that weren't weapons related.
Yeah.
Like he did one with like cranes and forklifts, and I think he did one for food. So there were a bunch of random things, but it was mostly weapons and ammunition. That was his specialty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Around that timeline, there's a scene in the movie where he's getting some weed.
Yeah.
And then these guys screw him over. They take his money and don't give him the weed. And then he walks back to his car.
Right.
Gets an, I don't know what, machine gun out.
Right.
And starts firing in the air. Did that actually happen?
No. Something like that. If you fire an automatic weapon on the streets of Miami, you're going to get arrested. That's very...
shit.
Yeah. It's very illegal. Okay. What is true is that we did have machine guns in the trunk. Yeah. That part is true because we were licensed. We had a federal firearms license.
But for what reason were they in there?
Because we'd like to go to the range and while everyone else was popping off pistols, we would go like get Uzis and go And suddenly, like, you'd hear, like, everyone else, all the other guns would stop, and everyone, like, leans out of their booths, and they're like, what the fuck was that? And, like, then people start coming by. They're like, whoa, you guys have those, you know? So it was a lot of fun. But, yeah, we just did it for fun. We because we could.
Yes.
You know?
I mean, fuck yeah. It's the coolest thing ever. Everybody knows what a Uzi is. Everybody's played Max Payne and whatnot. So we're like, and you have it in real.
Yeah.
How much, what is it called? Recoil do you have on an Uzi?
Not that much, actually. I mean, there is some because it's a small gun with decent firepower. But the caliber isn't that high. It's a 9mm, so it's like pistol ammo, but automatic. So
Interesting.
Yeah, it goes. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys started working together.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So originally, actually, the idea was that I would work on other things, not like guns and weapons, not weapons or ammo, because he wanted to expand the business into other fields. So I started working on fuel contracts because fuel is it's a fungible good. It's the same no matter where you buy it. And there's a lot of it, and it's consumable, enormous money, so they constantly need it. So I started bidding on contracts, on fuel contracts, and the first contract I ever won was about like maybe a month into starting working with them, and it was for 40,000 gallons of propane. And I delivered that to Air Force Base in Wyoming and made about, we were splitting it 50-50 for the contracts I worked on. It was just a commission thing. I wasn't getting like a salary or anything. And I made, I think, like $8,000 on that for the first contract. So it was not bad for a few weeks of work.
Oh,
yeah. And
where did you source it from?
it was from some distributor in the Midwest, and I was surprised they weren't bidding on it direct. but that's how it goes. You know, you don't really you would think that all these contracts are bid on directly by big companies, but there are some contracts of what they call small business set-asides. So certain contracts, only small businesses qualify to even bid on them. So even though the big company can beat the small business on price easily because they have the economies of scale, the government is required by law to, I think it's something like 27%, somewhere around there, of all the money needs to go towards small businesses. Now, what they consider small business is a business that makes like less than 10 million in you a year. It still could be a relatively big business, but you're not competing against like Fortune 500 companies for those small contracts.
That definition of small business is so funny, especially in the States, because I remember my first business, the dating advice business, it was incorporated in the States.
Yeah.
And it was also Bank of America, and they called me a small business. I made like $3 to $5 million a year, and I'm like, what do you mean, small? I'm making fucking $5 million a year, goddamn. I got really pissed. But then I realized.
Felt it.
Yeah. I'm like, what the hell? But yeah, that's just the definition.
Yeah, that's how they, when they're looking at the multi-billion-dollar businesses, completely different. Yeah.
Okay, so that was the first contract, and what happened then?
So I worked on a bunch of contracts that I lost because it's very normal in government contracting to lose. It's a casino. You know, you don't know who you're bidding against. You don't know what their prices are. In fact, by law, the government is not allowed to tell you, right? Because they want you to give your best price. Yeah. And so you could be the only person bidding, but they won't tell you that. So you'll still give them a good price. Yeah. There are certain contracts where they require a minimum 3 bidders. Otherwise, they have to put it out again. So there are different rules depending on what contract it is. But I bid on a whole bunch of contracts, lost a whole bunch of them, I think over the course of a month. And then Efraim came to me and said, hey, look, I won a contract. It's for rare gun parts, but I don't want to spend the time to deliver on it. Because what he did is he knew the industry. He knew that this particular contract, it was for I forgot 130 different items, all rare gun parts. So not stuff that's regularly made. It's all historical pieces like Lugers from the World War II era, Soviet weapons. And this was going to the special forces in the United States because the special forces need to train on pretty much every weapon system out there just because they don't know what they're going to come across when they're out in the field. So he bid it at a pretty high price because he knew that this was such a pain in the ass contract to source that he didn't think anyone was going to bid on it, and he was right. So he bid on it without actually locking down suppliers first.
Oh, okay.
But he knew the general price points. He's like, oh, we can definitely find price, something at this, below this price. So he told me, he's like, look, this is going to require a lot of work, but there's a really high margin in it. But I don't have time to work on this. Why don't you work on this? So I got the federal firearms license list from the ATF. That's the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms Administration in the United States. It's a public list. It's like 70,000 businesses long of people who are licensed to sell guns. And I pretty much called them all.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. I was going to say, is this manually?
It had to, every fucking one. Yeah, because they only give you like the phone number. I think sometimes they may list the emails, but I think at the time it was mostly phone numbers. So yeah, I called a good chunk of that list and eventually sourced the whole thing. It took me like several months, but made a decent amount of money. And that was my first contract that I did for weapons.
How much did you make?
I think it was about $30K.
Nice.
Yeah. Nice. So it was like my first taste of the weapons business. And then like after that, I worked on like a vehicle contract that didn't go through. And then we saw the contract. Then about 9 months after I started working with him, we saw the contract that we got infamous for. That was to supply the Afghan National Army with munitions through the U.S. Army. So, and the way that contract came about was that the United States, after September 11th, invaded Afghanistan, and they were trying to build a democratic government there, and failed miserably. But at the time, the Bush administration thought that the Bush administration was super unpopular at the time, and they thought the next administration would be the Democrats, which they were right. Obama was a Democrat, but they thought that the Democrats would pull out of Afghanistan immediately, which they were wrong about. And it took until Biden to pull out. So they wanted to arm the Afghani National Army for like the next 30 years, just in case the support stopped from the United States, so that they wouldn't get taken over by the Taliban again or other groups, from Pakistan that they were fighting. So in Iraq, they had split the contract, like the supplies for the Iraqi army, into a whole bunch of different suppliers, and it became a huge headache for them. So they decided, instead of doing that, they wanted to just deal with a single person. So they combined the entire supply into one, and that's why it was such an enormous contract. Now, for such an enormous contract, we ended up bidding it at $300 million, just under $300 million. And that was by far the lowest. We think we beat the next lowest bid by about $50 million. Yeah. And so
I remember. I remember that scene. That's the scene where there was something with you guys smoked weed.
Yeah. So that's partially true, that scene.
Okay.
So I'll tell you which parts are true and which parts aren't. So the true part is that Efraim did smoke weed, right? Before meeting with them. Only him. Well, I wasn't actually even there. Yeah. So the guy who was with Efraim was our investor, Ralph. He's an older guy. In the movie, he's played by this Jewish laundromat owner.
Okay.
In real life, he wasn't Jewish. He was actually a Mormon.
Okay.
And he owned a machine gun factory, not and he lived in Utah. He wasn't even in Miami. So his name was Ralph. They got that part.
There you go.
Yeah. But so Efraim figured that he looked so young, because he was like 18, 19 at the time, that no. Before we won that contract, he was already, he was 19, almost 20.
Okay.
And so he decided that he wanted Ralph to come with him instead of me, because he wanted an older guy there to make him look a little more respectable.
Yeah.
So he had Ralph go with him. Ralph is like a Mormon, straight-laced, but he did smoke weed before. Like, I mean, he was doing drugs all fucking day. He was doing weed, he was doing coke, he was doing like, pills. He was just like a raging drug addict. And yet he still managed to like do business. It blew my mind. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do that. But anyway, so they didn't tell him about that we beat the next guy by like $50 million during that meeting.
Okay.
It's illegal for them to tell you that.
Okay.
By law, they're only allowed to release the winning price. So they published the price that we bid the contract at, but they were not allowed to tell us how much we beat the other guys at, because that gives us information about the market. And then the next contract, we're going to bid it higher, The way we found out about that is I actually got a phone call after we won the contract, and we had some issues getting licensing, because when you fly military goods over countries, you need to get permission from each country you fly over to move those goods. It's called an overflight permit. So we were moving the ammo from Albania to Afghanistan, and I think we had to get overflight permits from like 12 or 13 countries in between. And we were having some trouble getting overflight permits. And so I started calling up the defense attaches and the U.S. embassies in those countries. That's the representative of the Pentagon within the U.S. embassy that deals with military matters. And they were, trying to help me get the overflight permits. And I was, and the U.S. Army was managing the contract out of Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois. And they were starting to pressure us to deliver, because it was, I think it was like April, and we still hadn't gotten the overflight permits. And Afghanistan has a fighting season. So they only fight during the spring and summertime, because when there's snow in Afghanistan, you can't go through the mountain passes and attack your enemies. So fighting season was starting, and our Afghan allies were running out of ammo, and the U.S. Army was freaking out that they're going to have no ammo to fight with. And so they kept on calling us up. Hey, where's the ammo? Where's the ammo? And I told them, hey, we're having trouble with these overflight permits. And they were like, oh, we're going to call up the defense attaches and make sure this is highest priority. Yeah. And the contracting officer who was in charge of managing our contract told me, he's like, we really wanted you guys to succeed, because you guys were just so competitive. We were so impressed, with how competitive you guys are. And I'm like, really? How competitive? And he goes to me, this is over his phone. He's like, not really allowed to tell you that, but I'll tell you, just between you and me, you guys beat the next company by like $52 million. And I was like, holy shit. And I told Efraim, and he was furious. He was like, mother, we could have made another $50 million. Fuck. So yeah, he was furious about that. Yeah, so that scene in the movie is partially true. He was furious, but it didn't happen in the way they portray it. Yeah, when they're doing the movie, they need to have things that kind of like look nice on the screen. It's not as cool if you're just talking on the phone. So it looks cooler if you're like in a big, you're high, if you're on weed, and by a big official-looking table with a bunch of guys. They would have never done that, because they're breaking the law in front of their colleagues.
Yeah, can't do it.
It's like, oh, we're not supposed to tell you this, but let me do something illegal in front of 5 witnesses. Yeah, that's not going to happen like that. Yeah.
So makes sense. Yeah. And then you get the overflight permits.
Yeah,
you deliver it.
Yeah.
On time.
Well, we weren't exactly on time, but we were close enough. We started delivering, and they were really happy, the U.S. Army. But before we delivered, so at the time, the issue we were facing, one of the issues besides the overflight permits, is that the price of fuel, of oil, skyrocketed in early 2007, right when we won the contract. And all of our ammo had to go by air freight, because Afghanistan is a landlocked country surrounded by unstable countries. We were thinking about shipping it by ocean to Pakistan, to Karachi, and then trucking it into Afghanistan. And then everyone told us, yeah, you're just going to get your stuff stolen by a bunch of warlords in between. They would like nothing more than to, grab a huge shipment of ammunition.
Yeah.
So we had to fly everything to Afghanistan, which cost us a whole bunch of money. And because air freight is like 80% the price of fuel, and the price of fuel skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Now, a normal company like General Dynamics is like a big multi-billion-dollar company. We beat them for this contract. We beat like a whole bunch of very big companies. They would have done like a fuel hedge, right, where they buy kind of like insurance. So if the price of fuel changes too much, they would the insurance company would pay out so they don't lose money on that shift in prices. But Efraim didn't play like that. He liked taking bigger risks. He didn't want to spend money on insurance. So he didn't buy the fuel hedge. And when we actually won the contract and the fuel prices changed drastically, we're like, fuck, what are we going to do? So I had the idea because we got pictures of the ammo. It was like, it was in like heavy wooden crates. And I thought, well, we don't need heavy wooden crates. Inside the wooden crates are these metal sardine cans, they call them, which are like vacuum sealed. We could just take the sardine cans out of the wooden crates and save the weight, and that'll reduce the shipping costs. So we measured the weights, the crates, and it was very heavy. It turned out we could become profitable again by getting rid of it. But when we inspected it, we saw that there were Chinese markings all over the wooden crates and all over the metal tins. And there was even Chinese documents inside the metal tins. And this was a big problem because our contract specifically said no Chinese ammunition could be delivered either directly or indirectly under this contract because there's an arms embargo against China that was placed by the United States in 1989 after the Tiananmen Square massacre. So now our contracts didn't actually mention the arms embargo. It didn't say no ammunition that violates the arms embargo. It just said no Chinese ammunition, period. And this ammunition that was in Albania that we wanted to buy had been given to the Albanians by the Chinese in the 70s. Before the arms embargo. So it didn't violate the arms embargo. But it did violate the terms of our contract because our contract didn't mention the arms embargo, just said no Chinese, period. So we were thinking at the time, we're like, crap, this violates the terms of our contract. We had two choices. We could either tell the army, say, hey guys, we kind of fucked up. We have this ammo. It's ready to ship. We got all the overflight permits finally, but we just discovered that it's Chinese. Can you give us a waiver? It doesn't violate the embargo. And in retrospect, they probably would have given them, because we found out later they knew the whole time. They didn't really care. But
how did they know?
Oh, so I'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So the government, like all governments, it has different departments, right? So there's the State Department. Our contract was with the U.S. Army, right? Who's part of the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And their mission was support our Afghan allies so that they have security in order to build up their country, right? The State Department, which is more concerned about like international relations, they were the ones more concerned about like embargoes and, enforcing that stuff. The State Department in Albania, we have an embassy there, right? We met with one of the representatives of the State Department before shipping this stuff, and he said, "Oh yeah, this stuff is all Chinese, but it's great because at the time Albania was trying to join NATO, and one of the requirements to join NATO was that they get rid of all their old Soviet-era ammo. They were going to have to pay to dismantle it. So they were thrilled to get paid anything for it and not have to pay to dismantle it. And so the State Department guy was like, oh, yeah, this is a win-win-win for everybody. The Albanians don't have to pay to dismantle it. We get the cheapest ammo in the world. The Afghans have something to fight with. It's great. And so we were like, okay, well, the State Department's cool with it. They're the ones who care about embargoes, So we figured, but we didn't want to risk some bureaucrat in the U.S. Army saying, well, technically, you violate the terms of the contract. And you know what? It's not really fair to your competitors, that they had to bid with these restrictions and then we changed the restrictions after you win the contract. It's not fair.
Yeah.
So we were worried that we were going to lose our $300 million contract over a technicality because some bureaucrat was going to be a hard ass about it. So we were like, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't risk that. Why don't we just not tell them about it? And we hired an Albanian guy to repackage the ammunition to get rid of all the Chinese boxes, and so that there would be no Chinese markings anywhere. And
how many boxes were that?
Oh man, I think it was something, if I recall correctly, something between 60 and 70,000 crates.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. How long did it take them?
They were doing the pack at our peak. We were delivering about 4 aircraft loads a week into Afghanistan, and each aircraft load had 45 tons. It was an IL-76 Russian aircraft, and each aircraft load had 45 tons and about a little under 3 million rounds per aircraft. So we were delivering about 12 million rounds a week.
Jeez, man.
Yeah. At our peak, yeah. Yeah. So it was quite an operation. And once we got it going, of course, Efraim decided that he wanted to make more money. And because we had set up the deal with through an intermediary, a guy named Henry Tomei. In the movie, he's played by Bradley Cooper. In the movie, they call him Henry Gerard, but they changed his last name. His name is Henry. He was a Swiss arms dealer. In real life, he looked more like a Swiss banker than this, how Bradley portrays him, And Bradley portrays him as this rough, unshaven guy with red eyes and thick glasses, and he was yelling and screaming, and he wasn't like that in real life. In real life, he's real clean cut, nice suit, always calm, never raised his voice, very Swiss. Efraim wanted to cut Henry out of the deal in order to make more money, because that's just what Efraim did.
Man,
it was never enough.
I was gonna say
it's never enough. And so he flies over to Albania, and he's like, you guys, we should make a deal direct, and they are like, no, we're not cutting Henry out, and probably because Henry was bribing the politicians. We assume, we don't know, obviously, but we do know that Henry was friends with the Albanian prime minister's son, and that the Albanians refused to cut Henry out of the deal. So probably because that everyone was getting their piece of the pie, so to speak, from Henry's end. So the Albanians tell Efraim, well, we're not going to cut Henry out, but we know that you hired this other Albanian guy to do the repackaging. So why don't you give us the repackaging job? We'll make money on the repackaging, and then we'll give you a little discount off the ammo because we're going to make more money. We'll have more business. And Ephraim's like, yeah, sure, fine. That guy's fired. You're hired. Let's go. The guy who he fired calls me up, and a guy named Kosta Trebishka, and he says, hey, I know you guys are changing suppliers for the repackaging. I understand it's just business, but I got stuck with $20,000 worth of boxes that I have nothing to do with now. Can you guys at least buy those boxes from me? And I told him, yeah, that makes sense. We'll buy the boxes. I tell Efraim, buy the boxes from this guy. And Ephraim's like, yeah, I'll do it. A week later, I get another call from Code. Hey, I still haven't gotten paid for the boxes. I talked to Efraim, and Ephraim's like, yeah, I talked to the new guys who are doing the repackaging. They already got their boxes. They don't want to deal with this guy. Just fuck him. Let him go. I'm like, well, why don't you just pay him the money anyway? Because he knows everything we're doing. So why don't you just keep him quiet? And everyone's like, nah, what's he going to do? He's going to keep his mouth shut. He's not going to do anything. Fuck that guy. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, Efraim, that's a bad idea. It's $20,000. We have $300 million contract. Maybe you should just pay him just in case. Insurance, right? But Efraim doesn't buy insurance. He doesn't do things like that. So he's like, yeah, don't worry about him. Fuck him. He's not going to do anything. He's a nobody, So this guy, Costa, gets really pissed off, understandably. And he calls up the New York Times. And he tells them what we're doing. And he also called up the FBI and told them what we were doing. And his biggest mistake is he called up the local Albanian press. And he told the reporters in Albania that the politicians are getting bribes from this.
Oh, shit.
And about a week later, Costa ends up dead in mysterious circumstances. So they found him in a field, in the middle of nowhere on a dirt road. And somehow he had been run over by his own car. So the Albanian government, of course, classified it as an accident.
Yeah.
But nobody believes it was an accident. So, yeah. So that was pretty scary moments where holy crap, this shit's,
Yeah, that's how that's Albania.
Yeah, that's Albania.
Don't fuck with Albania.
Don't fuck with Albanians. Yeah, exactly. For real. Later on, we found out that the deal was that was done with the Albanian government. It was going through one of the top leaders of the Albanian mafia, a guy named Mikhail Deliorgi. He later got arrested because he was involved in the explosion at Gerdek, which is a famous incident in Albania, where people online, I see these comments on other interviews I've done. People think that we were involved with that. We weren't. The people we were doing business with were involved in that. It was where they were trying to take apart a bunch of munitions that were in bad condition, so they couldn't sell it. and they hired a bunch of like kids to do it.
Oh, fuck.
And like teenagers, and like they were smoking cigarettes while they're taking apart, tank rounds. And it created one of the I think the largest non-nuclear explosion in history.
Jesus fuck.
It killed like 100 people, it shattered like windows in like, I think Tirana, which was like 50 miles away. It was enormous. And it became an enormous.
What year was that?
I think this was 2007, like towards the end of 2007. And because of that, it became a big political scandal, understandably so. And so then they investigated and they arrested Mikhail Deliorgi and Pinari, who was his business partner. And these are the people we were buying from. So people think that we were involved. It was actually another American company called Southern Ammunition that had the contract to do this, and they were doing it in cooperation with the Albanians. But I think it was the Albanians who did all the local hiring and management. So anyway, but that happened later on. So, after Efraim makes this deal, switches the packaging guy, he comes back to Miami, and he tells me, he's like, hey, he comes into my office. He's like, a lot of the guys at this point, we started out just working, me and him, out of his like living room.
Yeah.
But at this point we had about like 15 employees in an office.
Yeah.
And he goes to me, he's like, a lot of the guys around the office are saying that, you're not pulling your weight around here anymore. And I was like, what are you talking about? The contract, the Afghanistan contract is going well. And he says to me, he's like, well, we're really struggling with our Iraq contracts, and you're not helping out with that. And I said, well, I only get paid on a commission. I'm not one of your employees. You want to give me a commission on the Iraq contract? I'll help with that. He's like, oh, don't be crazy. You didn't help us win those contracts. Why should I give you a commission on that? And I'm like, well, then why do you want me to work on it?
Yeah.
And he says, well, because, if our Iraq contracts go down, then it takes down the company, and your Afghanistan contract goes with it. So you have to help out with everything and, save the company. I said, well, do you want to give me a piece of the company then if you want me to work on everything? And he says, well, you know what? I've been thinking a lot about this. And I own 100% of AEY Inc., and I always intended to keep it that way. But you know what, David? You're my best friend, and you've been working really hard, and you're a big reason why AEY is so successful as it is today. So I'm going to offer you $100,000 a year as executive salary, plus 1% of AEY. And I told him, well, I'm supposed to get 25% of the Afghan contract, and that's going to make us 90% of all the money the company's going to make in the next year. And I'm set to make about $15 million from that arrangement. So I'll turn down your $100,000 a year salary and stick with my original deal where I'm about to make $15 million. And he says to me, well, how about zero? Because that's the only offer on the table.
Jesus Christ, man.
And I told him, well, in that case, go fuck yourself, and I'll see you in court. And I walked out, and that was my last day working at AEY.
Wow.
Yeah.
There was no trying to renegotiate with him. I mean, maybe he was...
So this was actually the third renegotiate. Okay, I'm like skipping a whole bunch of stuff because it wouldn't be that interesting. But he was constantly trying to renegotiate. And at the last renegotiation, this is how I got to 25%, right? The last renegotiation, what we had gotten in writing for the first time. Everything else was just like, an agreement, a handshake. And then by the time I was like, you know what? I'm so tired of this guy continually trying to renegotiate. We're going to put it in writing. He signed it. Unfortunately for me, my scanner was broken. And so I didn't scan it. And I was planning on getting it fixed in a few days.
Yeah.
The contract was on my living room table. He was the only person to come over my apartment.
Oh, shit.
And it mysteriously disappeared.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So I felt like an idiot. I should have scanned it and hadn't gotten a copy, but I didn't have a copy. And I think he knew that. So I didn't have a contract. But I mean, it was very obvious he owed me something because I'd been working for years on a commission basis. And the question is, what is that commission? So
yeah.
Verbal contracts are enforceable. They're just harder to prove what they were.
Yeah.
So anyway, I left and I was like, fuck this guy. I was getting ready to sue him. We were like negotiating a settlement. Actually, the day we were going to sign the settlement, I get a call from his secretary in his office, because I was on good terms with all the people who worked in the office. Everyone hated him. He was an asshole. He would like walk into the office and start yelling at everybody. Oh, I don't pay you guys to fucking chit chat. Get on your computers, make me some fucking money. Like that's kind of like how he was.
Classic Hollywood bum.
He really was. He was a real dick. So
how much of that do you think is his personality versus the drugs?
I think it's all the same. Like I think he was like that when he wasn't on drugs. He did the drugs because of his personality, and the drugs enhanced the nasty parts of his personality, depending on what drug he was on. Like there were some drugs which he would get like more spacey, but like he was an asshole regardless if he was on weed or on cocaine.
Okay,
those tend to be opposite. Vibes. So yeah, I mean, he was an asshole either way.
All right.
He got off on it. It was all about like power. Like he didn't really care so much, like, because he didn't like lead such a lavish lifestyle, at least not at that time. Later on, when he knew he was going to prison, he started like really spending money on hookers and even more drugs and gambling. He became a gambling addict.
Also, fuck.
So he lost a lot of money gambling and hookers and drugs. And and he actually it's hilarious. He ended up suing, I think it was some huge pharmaceutical company, because he claimed that the psychiatric medication that he was on, that they were making, turned him into a drug, gambling, and sex addict. So he, of course, had to blame
outsourcing responsibility.
Exactly. So yes. Anyways, I was on good terms with everybody. So the secretary calls me up and she's like, "Hey, I just want to let you know that federal agents just raided our office."
Oh,
and I was like, "Oh crap, we're fucked."
And how old were you back then?
I had just turned 25.
I mean, just to put that in perspective, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
25 years old, and you've been through all this already, and now you're dealing with federal agents.
Yeah.
I'd say that.
And I had just had a daughter. She was 6 months old.
I remember that in the movie. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot, and I thought, because I'd been spending, I'd been living off my savings the entire time, right? Because every time I won those other contracts, and we were like, by the time the government pays you 30 days later. So by the time we were going to get paid by the government, we were already about to win another contract. And he would tell me, "Hey, we're going to need money to fund this other contract. So I'm funding it with my money. It's only fair you fund it with your money. You just made a bunch of money on this contract. So why don't we just use that money you made, roll it into the next one?"
So you got zero paid out?
So I got zero paid out to this point. I'd been living off my $100,000 that I had made before starting to work with him.
Yeah.
But that was dwindling down, I was down to like $30K at that point. And I was like, man, I just went from thinking I was going to be set for life, making $15 million, to I'm about to, like, in another few months, I had to pay child support, I'm about to like be on the streets.
Yeah.
So it was an enormous stress.
Did that money already, the $15 million, did that already get put into the company, but your partner didn't want to give it to you, or was it not?
So out of the money, so he owed, at the time, he hadn't delivered on the whole contract. At the time, he owed me about $5 million, just a little under $5 million. By the time I quit. So I went from about to make millions to about to go bankrupt. So I was super, super stressed and having to support a kid. So when I heard the federal agents raided the office, I immediately called up a lawyer and I'm like, "Hey, what should I do here?" And the lawyer's like, "Well, the first thing you should do is go into your emails and your text messages and see what kind of evidence they might have against you, because you have to assume they're already in there. They probably had the federal government only usually executes a search warrant after they already get your emails and text messages and they're in your phone listening to your conversations and all that, So you have to assume that. And if they don't have it now, they're going to have it soon.
Yeah.
If they got the permission to search the office, they're going to get permission to get into your emails. So I went through my emails searching Chinese ammunition, repackaging, and it turned out we were not careful. We were originally, when we first decided to do the repackaging, Efraim was like, "Oh, we're only talking on the phone about this. No, nothing in writing." And then, but then Efraim really wanted to see like pictures of the Chinese markings to make sure they were Chinese and not Korean, right? Because he didn't trust, so he wanted to see it. And so that got sent over. So that was by email. So, and then our investor Ralph sent over step-by-step instructions of how to sand off Chinese markings off wooden crates. Like literally I don't know why he had to use Chinese markings could have used any markings, but he had pictures of like Chinese markings on wooden crates and then a sander on it. And then like, look at how it looks after it's been sanded off. So it was just like super, super obvious what we were doing. And then
if you had deleted those emails after reading them, would they still be visible to the government? Can they somehow look into the deleted stuff?
So there is, to a certain extent, yes. So it depends on like how, I don't know how long, the cloud services keep deleted stuff, but they do keep it for a certain amount of time.
Okay.
And if it looks like you deleted evidence, they give you, it's even worse. Yeah, they charge you for obstructing justice.
Okay,
which is a whole separate crime that they could charge you and sentence you for. So that gets added on top to everything else you do. So yeah, if they think that you if they can prove that you've deleted stuff that you should not, that was specifically with the intent of covering up your crimes, that's a separate crime.
Okay.
So that's why lawyers will tell you, if you're ever under investigation, do not delete anything, because they probably already have it. And even if they don't have it, they're going to have it soon. Now, if you had deleted it like a year before, possibly, I don't know. I'm not giving anyone advice here how to cover up their crimes. But yeah, I mean, like, that being said, if you do want to commit crimes, probably Signal with automatically deleted messages would probably be the way to go. From what I hear, I'm no digital criminal expert here.
Yeah.
I would say the best thing to do is to just not commit those crimes in the first place. Definitely, that's
recommended.
That's what I recommend to everyone. Don't commit crimes. But if you were going to do anything that you're not even you think might be a crime, best thing to do is just talk about it. Don't do anything by writing. Best thing to do is just talk in person. If you can't do that, talk over the phone, because they usually don't record the conversations. Maybe the NSA in the United States is recording conversations, and now with all the new AI stuff, they can probably search that stuff a lot easier. So yeah, I would say even phone calls are probably somewhat dangerous these days. So yeah, in person is probably the safest. I would say second safest is like end-to-end encryption, like Signal with automatically deleted messages so that it's not there. Because the government, the FBI is able to hack into iPhones, which claim to have super high encryption. And you see it when they when there's like school shooters, like or like terrorists or something, the FBI will say, "Oh, they got into his iPhone."
Yeah,
and like, how did they do that?
True. Yeah,
they don't want to tell you how they did that. Did Apple let them in, or do they have ways of breaking into that, breaking that encryption? They won't tell you. So yeah, it's definitely not one. No digital thing is 100% safe for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, after I realized that there was a whole bunch of evidence against me and there was no way I could deny what happened, my lawyer told me, well, in that case, I mean, it's possible you could get off on the technicality, but there's no guarantee of that. And even just to try, you need like $300,000 to have a good defense. Jeez. And he's like, do you have that? And I'm like, no, I'm down to like 30. So he's like, well, in that case, you don't really have a choice. You really should just cooperate. And I felt no loyalty to Efraim, obviously. He didn't offer to pay for my lawyers. So my lawyer agreed to have me talk to the agents, and the agents interviewed me. And the way they work it is they tell you, okay, you're going to tell us everything. We're not going to tell you what we know, but you're going to tell us everything you know. And if we think that you left anything out, then you get no credit for cooperation. And we're going to tell the judge to go extra hard on you because you're trying to obstruct justice. And we're trying to obstruct the investigation. So, of course, I was scared shitless, and I told them everything I knew. And at the end of the interview, they
tell you that we had nothing on you.
No, actually. So what they told me, this is actually kind of funny. What they told me was, they told me, you're probably wondering what we know. And I just because you're wondering, we'll tell you this. When we did the raid on the office, we found on Efraim's desk a to-do list in his handwriting. And one of the items on the to-do list was repackaged Chinese ammo. So he's like, so yeah, we knew about this.
Okay.
I don't know why Efraim had to write China. I don't know. He could have just said repackaged China ammo, or he could have said repackage. He would have known what why he had to put it so specific. I don't know. He wasn't thinking about it. As with many things. So anyway, after that interview, they told me, look, you're not a kingpin. You didn't even make any money from this whole operation. We're not going after you. We're going after Efraim.
Sweet.
As long as you cooperate, we're going to do our best not to charge you with anything. So you don't have to even go to trial.
Do you get that in writing or anything like that, or do you just have to believe?
Unfortunately, not. They give you nothing.
Okay.
The government is in a position of power, and unless you have some real leverage on them, they give you nothing. Right.
Hey, real quick, you got to do me a favor, and no, it's not going to be smuggling guns across borders. I'm actually only asking you for one thing. If you enjoy this podcast, leave a like, drop a comment down below. It will help us tremendously reach a wider audience, and that will in turn give you more awesome guests like this one entirely for free. If you listen to this on Spotify or iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating. I'm not sure if you can drop comments there. Try it. I would tremendously appreciate that. Maybe we'll get sponsors at some point on the podcast, but until then, only thing I'm asking for is to drop a like, 5-star rating, comment to show your support. Now back to the episode. But so how much do you trust them when they say that?
Very little.
Okay.
The way my lawyer told me is like, really, you don't really have enough unless you have leverage on them. You pretty much, and which is not the case here. They have all the leverage on you, right? Because you have no money to defend yourself, and they have a lot of evidence against you. So pretty much the way my lawyer put it, he's like, you pretty much just have to bend over and ask them not to fuck you too hard. That's really how it goes. So,
oh man,
and because as my lawyer told me before, we were deciding whether to cooperate with the government, he asked me, he's like, let me ask you a question. It may sound like a joke, but it is serious. How much justice can you afford?
And I think that's a line in the movie too. I haven't heard it. It feels like I've heard it before.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a joke, but not a joke, and he's like, how much money do you have to pay for a defense? And I said, not $300K. And he's like, well, then you can't afford much justice. So you don't really even have an option to fight them in court. And even if you do fight them in court, the federal government wins more than 98% of their case. That's their win rate.
Jesus Christ, man.
So your odds are low,
yeah,
right, of winning. It's not to say it's impossible. People do beat the federal government, but usually when they have a lot of money and the evidence isn't that strong. But if you don't have money and the evidence is strong against you, you don't have much of a chance.
How much did you pay that lawyer to give you all that advice? Because it's kind of useless. No offense.
Yeah. So it cost me $30,000 to plead guilty.
Oh, geez.
Just to plead guilty, because you need a lawyer to negotiate with the government during that process to make sure they don't fuck you over.
Yeah, and that included all the advice.
Exactly. The entire process of me pleading guilty cost me $30,000, which was every penny I had. I was completely broke at the end of this. Yeah. So, but it was worth every penny because I stayed out of prison. So that was worth every penny.
That is worth it, yeah.
You can make more money. You could never make more time, You
can never unfuck your own ass, I guess.
Exactly.
If you're
that too, yeah, exactly.
Do you know what prison you would have gone to if it didn't work?
It would have been, yes, because Efraim went to prison. He got 4 years. And he went to what they call a federal camp. They call it. It's a camp. It's still a prison, but it's where they put all like the white collar criminals. So very low levels of violence. You don't have to worry about dropping the soap in the shower.
Okay.
It's not like the state prisons tend to be a lot more violent because that's where they put all like the violent criminals.
Okay.
And also the supermax prisons, federal prisons also, they put like the criminals who are violent over there.
Yeah.
But if you committed financial crimes like fraud or tax evasion, then you go to the minimum security prison. And it's not fun, but it's not horrible. It's not like the horror stories in movies.
It's like prison for nerds. It's where
Pretty
our
much.
kids
Yeah,
go. Okay.
exactly. Yeah. It's prison for tax fraud. Is most of the people in there. People commit tax fraud.
Did Efraim get paid? And did he get to keep any of the money?
So Efraim got to keep almost all the money.
Wow.
Yeah, and the reason he got to keep all the money was because when they charge you. So let me back up a little.
Yeah.
Right. We're jumping ahead. So I'll go a little bit more chronologically.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So after they did the raid on the office, they told me, we're not going to charge you with anything. Just cooperate. You're fine. I'm like, great, because I can't afford to get charged, right? 6 months go by, and they don't charge him with anything either. And he keeps on delivering the Chinese ammo to the army. They keep on paying him for it. Every aircraft load, they pay him for it for 6 months.
Do you think that was the government telling them, hey, let him at least fucking deliver the stuff so we can keep fighting?
Yes, and I'll tell you how we found that out.
Okay.
So 6 months later, the New York Times finally gets around to publishing their article that they were investigating because the box guy told them about it.
Yeah.
The article was front page.
Oh, shit.
With our mugshots on it.
Oh, really?
Next to rusty-looking ammunition. It did not look good.
Wait, don't worry. Can we pull that up? Do you mind if we look at the?
Oh, sure.
What do you know the issue, the month of the year?
It was, I believe it was like March 23rd, 2008.
Yeah,
it was very traumatic.
March 23rd, 2008.
Yeah,
Just
New York Times War Dogs. You'll probably find it.
The New York Times publishes it. You guys are on the New York Times headline for the wrong reasons.
Yes,
but you're there.
Yeah, our mugshots are on the front page, and it's next to like rusty-looking ammunition. And the ammunition they had on the front page of the New York Times wasn't even the Chinese.
Wasn't even real, probably.
Yeah, it was ammunition we had delivered, but it was actually Bulgarian ammunition. The way that ammo got to Afghanistan, and the reason it ended up on the New York Times front page is because we were buying grenades out of Bulgaria. We had some extra room on the aircraft, and we had gotten offered like 30,000 rounds of ammunition from Bulgaria. That it was such a small amount that it wasn't worth going to inspect it. And the price was so low that Efraim was willing to just roll the dice and hope it was good. He figured if they accept it and it's good quality, they do the inspection at the delivery point.
Okay.
He's like, if they inspect it and it's good quality, we'll make an enormous profit margin. If they inspect it and it's bad quality, well, I'm not spending that much money on it anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
All right.
And so he was willing to roll the dice on it. It turned out, not surprisingly, to be total crap, like rusty and so so they rejected it. They didn't pay us for it, but they didn't want to pay to ship it back, right? And they don't have any ammunition recycling facilities in Afghanistan. So what they did is they shoved the ammunition to the side of the airport, just left it there in the rain and the elements to continue to corrode. And when the New York Times sent a few months later, sent an investigative reporter to investigate in Afghanistan, and they asked around, can I see some of the stuff that AUI delivered? Someone pointed them at that, and that's the picture they got. And the way they wrote the article implied that most of the stuff we were delivering was of similar low quality, which was not true. And this created a massive political scandal. There were hearings on the floor of Congress, like some senator or congressman had one of those big easels, with the big papers, and it was like my picture and Efraim's picture on it. And he's like, these are the guys the Bush administration is trusting, on the central aspect of the war on terror. It's like this company is run by a 21-year-old guy and whose vice president is a massage therapist.
Oh, of course it gets politicized.
It got politicized, and it became a big scandal. So it got into the Associated Press network. So every major newspaper around the world republished the article.
Of course.
So I saw it got published in 300 newspapers in every major city around the world. So it was worldwide news. And 2 days after that, the U.S. Army issued a statement saying we had no idea any of this was happening. We're shocked and appalled, and we're going to cancel AUI's contract and put it out for open bid. a few days after that, the Justice Department called up my lawyer and said, hey, we know that we said we weren't going to charge him, but we feel like he's too close to the whole operation. We can't charge Efraim without charging David too.
Oh, shit.
And so we're very sorry, but we have to do this. And the way what they charged us with was they said, every aircraft of Chinese ammunition that you guys delivered had a document aboard called a certificate of conformance. And this certificate of conformance listed the type of ammunition, the quantity of ammunition, the year it was manufactured, and the place of origin. And place of origin, you guys put Albania. Mm-hmm. And you knew that the original place of origin was China. And not only did you know, you had a whole operation to hide that it was originally from China. So you knowingly supplied false information on this document. So supplying this document to the government is an act of fraud. And you did this 71 times. So that's 71 acts of fraud. And you can get 5 years in prison for each one.
Oh,
so you're looking at 355 years in prison.
Oh, my God.
Unless you plead guilty. If you plead guilty, as prosecutors, we have the power to combine 71 acts into one overall act. And so the maximum the judge could give you is 5 years. And because you're pleading guilty, we'll tell the judge you feel really bad about the whole thing. You'll be a good citizen from now on, and they should go easy on you. And maybe so the judge will probably give you on the low end of the guidelines. So maybe 1 year, maybe just probation. Who knows? Maybe able to avoid prison altogether. It's up to the judge, not up to us, right? We can't make any promises, but the judge usually follows the prosecutor's recommendations. No guarantee, right? So, of course, with those kind of options, either the rest of your life in prison or maybe nothing, and I didn't even have money to fight him in court anyway. So I pled guilty. Ephraim fought them for a little bit, for a few months, and then he realized he was going to lose anyway because he had millions of dollars.
Yeah.
He spent, from what I've heard, about $2 million on his lawyers. Throughout the whole process. Yeah. And he eventually pled guilty too. And he probably would have. So I ended up getting sentenced to 7 months of house arrest. I avoided prison completely. Feel very grateful. But he probably would have gotten maybe a year in prison at most, because he pled guilty. But when you plead guilty, you sign a document called a plea agreement. Right, that's a document that specifies all the things you're admitting to, and it's and on the government side, the prosecutors put in writing that they will tell the judge to go easy on you for signing this plea agreement.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things they put in the plea agreement is that this requirement for the prosecutors to ask for leniency, for the judge to give you a low sentence, that requirement goes away if you commit another crime before you get sentenced.
Oh.
Because how are they going to say to the judge that you're a reformed good citizen from now on if you're going out there committing more crimes? Doesn't look like you learned your lesson, right? So they told us, our business partner, our investor, Ralph, he also got charged, and he decided not to plead guilty. He decided to plead innocent and to go to trial. Mm-hmm. Now, that entire process of him going to trial took 3 years. And they didn't want to sentence us until his trial was over, because they wanted to use the sentencing as leverage against us in case they wanted us to testify at his trial. Mm-hmm. So they didn't sentence us. So during this time period, this 3-year time period, they told us, you guys can't do the arms business anymore. You can't be in this business. Go find something else to do. So I, of course, was terrified. I was scared shitless. And so I went back to school. I started studying mechanical engineering. I even started doing massage therapy, to make some money to support my kid. And but Efraim, of course, has a much higher tolerance for risk. And so he shut down his company that he owned, AUI Inc., was banned from doing business. But his latest lackey, the guy after I quit, he replaced me with someone else. He ended up screwing that guy over too. Sick. That guy quit. He replaced that guy with someone else. that guy the new guy, he had him start a company under his own name and started trying to do business under his new employee's, company's name. But the issue was that he's a control freak. So every time it got down to negotiate, he insisted on doing the negotiations himself. So, he'd have his lackey do the initial talking. And then when it started he's like, oh, give me the phone. And he starts talking. And so he was trying to do a deal with some gun dealer. I think it was in Central Florida near Orlando. And eventually the guy realized who he was. Googled him and saw all this shit, this stuff about him, and figured, reasonably so, that Efraim is probably trying to entrap him into doing something illegal so that he can get a reduction on his sentence, right? Which is kind of how it works in the United States. You only get a sentence reduction if you throw someone else under the bus. Then they go easy on you. So,
do you think that was the case? That he tried to?
I actually think he was trying to do that business.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that I don't believe that he was trying to. I could be wrong, but I don't. From the bit that I saw about the whole situation and the document, because it all came out in the court later. But from what I've read, it looked like he was legitimately trying to do business with this guy illegally. I mean, he wasn't supposed to be doing that business, but he was trying to do it under someone else's name. So. But the guy, I imagine, reasonably thought that he's trying to entrap him into something. So he calls up the ATF, right, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms Administration, and tells them, hey, I've got this convicted gun dealer trying to do an arms deal with me. What should I do? ATF tells him, that's very interesting. Why don't you introduce one of our undercover agents?
I remember that now, yeah.
To Efraim as your business partner. And so he introduces the undercover agent to Efraim. The undercover agent tells Efraim over the phone, he's like, I'm the kind of guy who needs to look you in the eye and shake your hand, before we do a deal.
Yeah.
And Ephraim's like, oh, yeah, I'm that kind of guy, too. That's how real men do business, And he's like, so why don't you come up to, Orlando and we'll shake on this and do this deal? And Ephraim's like, okay, I'll be there next weekend. He drives up to Orlando. The agent knew that Efraim was not allowed to leave the Southern District of Florida as part of his bond, right? While he was awaiting sentencing, they had the requirements that he stays in the Miami area. So that's why he had him go to Orlando, so he would break that requirement.
Okay.
So Efraim drives up to Orlando. The agent meets with him, knowing that Efraim is a gun nut, right? And knowing he's a convicted felon now because he pled guilty, it's illegal for convicted felons in the United States to be in possession of a firearm. That means holding one.
Yeah.
Right? You can get up to 10 years in prison for that.
Oh, geez.
So it's also illegal for someone to hand a felon a firearm, right? So what does the agent do? He pops the trunk of his hood open of his car and he points in his trunk and he says, hey, check out that gun I've got over there.
Oh my God.
It's the latest HK on the market. It's the coolest, latest, greatest thing. And Ephraim's like, oh, I've heard about that. Let me see that. Picks it up. Oh, this thing is awesome. Let's go to the range and pop off a few rounds. What can I say? But once a gun runner, always a gun runner. All right.
Dude.
The agent slaps the cuffs on him and he's like, you're a felon in possession of a firearm.
Oh my God, what a dick move too.
Yeah. Just entrapped him like that.
Shit.
And because he had broken the terms of his bond, they didn't let him post bail. So he had to stay in county jail in Orlando, which is no picnic, for like a year before he got sentenced. And eventually he got sentenced to 4 years. He could have gotten 15 years total. He could have gotten like 10 years for the gun charge, 5 years for the fraud charge. He hired the best lawyers in Miami, spent like millions of dollars, and ended up getting sentenced to 4 years. He got out in like 3.5 because he got like 6 months off for good behavior and like a drug rehab program. And nowadays he's still living in Miami, screwing everyone he does business with.
He still does it.
He still does it. Well, he's not in the arms business that I know of, but he from what I've heard, he funds lawsuits because so many people have sued him that he knows the legal system really well. So he'll like fund people's lawsuits, and then he'll take, I imagine the way he does business, takes 90% of the money and then figures out a way to take the last 10% too. You know, that's just how he does business. Every few years I get someone call me up. Hey, I made the big mistake of getting into business with this guy. Now I have to sue him. Can you give me any advice? This has happened multiple times.
Everything else.
So he's still the same guy he always was, you know. And
do you know if he's back on drugs again?
From what I heard, I don't know whether he's doing drugs, but from what I've heard, he's still working like a maniac, and then he like passes out for a few days.
Okay,
you know, like he sounds like drugs. I imagine he is. I would be surprised if he wasn't, because everyone who I know who still interacts with him has told me he's the exact same guy he was, you know, before going to prison.
Wow.
Yeah.
Didn't learn a bit.
Didn't learn a thing.
Fuck.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he learned how to avoid getting caught because he hasn't been charged yet that I know of. I keep expecting to read in the papers that he's been charged with something new or that someone killed him, you know, because he's screwed over a lot of people, like a lot of people, you know, and people that you really shouldn't screw over. So, like, he keeps where he lives secret. He doesn't want people knowing where he lives. He doesn't do any interviews because he doesn't want people to recognize him, you know. So I assume. Obviously, he's never admitted this to me. I haven't talked to him, so I haven't seen him in many, many years. And I like to keep it that way.
Yeah.
I've got a great life now. Dude, I want him in it. But, I ended up getting sentenced to 7 months of house arrest, as I mentioned.
That was where you have like a thing around your ankle.
Exactly. I had a tracking device on my ankle, and it's heaven compared to prison.
You
watch TV, and
sometimes I do this voluntarily.
Exactly. It wasn't bad at all. And my daughter was like, let's see, at that time she was 3-4 years old, so I got to spend a lot of time with her. Yeah, it was great. And actually, the house arrest turned out to be an amazing thing for me because it's how I got into the next phase of my life. While I was under house arrest, I'm a musician. I play guitar. I was obviously very bored. I played a lot of guitar. And it's not like a COVID-style lockdown where you have to stay at home and no one can visit you. People could visit me. I just couldn't leave my apartment. So I had a lot of my musician friends come over to jam. You know, we'd hang out. Couldn't smoke weed because I got drug tested, but we were hanging out playing music, but no drummer was going to bring his drum set over my house because it's a pain in the ass to move a drum set. So I bought a drum machine, which is like a tabletop electronic device. You can make the beats on it, play it in a loop. But every time I wanted to like change the beat from like going from like verse to chorus, the drums change. I'd have to stop playing my guitar and press a button on the machine to change the beat and then go back to playing my guitar. And it interrupted the flow of the music. And I was like, this is so annoying. I wish I had a drum machine on the floor in a pedal format so I could just tap it with my foot when I wanted the beat to change. And I was sure someone made it. So I went online to look for something like that and I couldn't find it. And I asked my musician friends and they told me, man, that sounds super cool. I've never seen anything like it, but if you find it, let me know. I want to get one too. And so I thought, well, if everyone wants one. Nobody's making it. Nice. So I did a patent search. No one even patented the idea of a hands-free drum machine. And so I got a patent in less than a year. It took me 3 years to develop the prototype. But by 2014, I delivered, it's called the BeatBuddy, like your buddy that plays the beat. That was my first invention. And it became a massive hit. Still to this day, 10 years later, it's a best-selling product. It sold millions and millions of dollars worth of it. And that was the start of my current company, Singular Sound, where we make a whole bunch of different products for musicians, all innovative new kinds of products, mostly guitar pedals. That they all work together, like the BeatBuddy. Yeah. And that's, so we're actually about to release our 10-year anniversary edition of BeatBuddy. Yeah, it's like going to be a nice color, it's a special color. And we're working on a whole bunch of new products. And that was my first experience. That's how I got into inventing things and developing products, which is actually super cool because I remember when I was 8 years old, the first thing I ever wanted to be growing up was an inventor. Aha. Yeah. I remember it because I was 8 years old and I read a book on how electricity is generated, like a kid's book. about like the spinning magnets, the steam turbines turning the magnets, which creates the electrical field and makes the electricity. And I thought in my 8-year-old brain that all you have to do is take the output of the generator, connect it to an electric motor, and connect the motor to the generator, and it'll just perpetual motion machine. Yeah. I just solved the world's energy problems. Can't believe anyone hasn't. These idiots. Yeah, I can't believe all these idiots haven't thought of this. And I told my dad about it, and he's like, "Wow, that's very smart. You know, you have a really good mind for inventing things, you know." And he bought me a little notebook, and he wrote on it David's invention book. Sick. And I still have it. No shit. It's super cute. And I thought of all these crazy inventions that never would work. You know, I remember my next invention was like a sneaker with a little fan in it, so you can go flying.
I know, hell yeah!
It's like very like 8-year-old shit. Yeah, very 8-year-old. Yeah, if it was possible to build. Very 8-year-old kinds of ideas.
Yeah.
So my first aspiration was to be an inventor, and going through house arrest was actually what kind of led me to my first commercial invention. And so we created a whole bunch of products for musicians. I actually I started my company Singular Sound with one of my brothers. I'm one of 9 children.
Oh, no,
very big family. And after being burned by Ephraim and having such a bad experience with business partners, I was like, I could only do something with someone I absolutely trust with my life. And so I founded Singular Sound with one of my brothers, and amazing job. Now, currently, out of my 5 brothers, 4 of them work in one of my companies. It's like a family business.
Fuck yeah.
And but my brother who founded Singular Sound with me, his name is Ellie. He's not a musician. He's a very like meticulous, organized person, but he's not a musician. So I'm like more the idea guy, and he's like more the execution guy for this business. And it was a great partnership. But because he's not a musician, he's always telling me, he's like, you got to come up with some ideas that aren't for musicians. Because the music market is small. It's a very niche market. It's only like maybe 1% of the population who would be interested in like high, tech, sophisticated music gear. And so we're always trying to come up with ideas for the general market. And one day we were hanging out at my house. We were smoking weed, and we got the munchies. And we were eating mango because it's like super sweet and juicy. Great munchy food. Great munchy food. But the problem with mango is you get all those fibers stuck in your teeth. And so my brother asked me, he's like, "Do you have any like dental floss?" And so we went to my bathroom, and we're both flossing our teeth. And I tell him, "Man, this is such a pain in the ass. If we could create a machine that could floss your teeth for you, everyone would buy that." And he looks at me, he's like, "Yeah, we have to come up with something that makes flossing easier." That was such an enormous market. And so we started brainstorming ideas, and eventually we came up with a product called InstaFloss, like Instagram, but flossing in the floss. And it's, we pretty much did, instead of, do you know what a water pick is?
Yeah.
All right. So for people who don't know, a water pick is like a water flosser. It's like a little stream of water that you have to point at your gum line.
It looks like a electronic toothbrush.
Yes, but like with a little nozzle that sprays like a little jet of water.
Yeah.
And this is, if you use water flossers correctly, they're actually more effective than straight floss because the water gets under the gum line, so it clears out all the bacteria. The problem is that to use it correctly, you have to point it at a 90-degree angle to the gum line, and you have to trace the gum line, top, bottom, and most difficultly, on the outside pointing, on the inside pointing out.
Yeah.
And when you do that, unless you're very practiced at it, you usually make a big mess, and people get discouraged, and they put it under their sink, and they never use it again. And that's why the water flossing market is only about $7 billion a year, right? While the general dental market is like $30 to $40 billion a year. So still bigger than the music industry. But we created InstaFloss. The innovation there is, instead of using a single water jet that you have to trace your gum line, and if you don't do it at a 90-degree angle, if you point it into the gum line, it irritates your gums. It'll make it inflamed. If you point it downwards, then it's not effective. It doesn't get the dirt So it needs to be at a 90-degree angle, and it has to trace it, which takes time, and it's annoying and makes a mess unless you're already practiced at it. So we created, and you could look up online, it's called instafloss.com. It's like a little H-shaped manifold that you bite. It uses 12 water jets.
Sick.
For all 4 quadrants, so top, bottom, and outside and inside.
Mm-hmm.
And you just bite into it, and you just sweep it across your teeth, and it gives you a full floss in 10 seconds at perfect 90-degree angles all around. So it makes it much, much easier and faster and more comfortable to floss. And so we just released that product just a few months ago, and it's been doing really, really well.
Nice.
Yeah, and so that's our first non-musical product. So that's I'm really excited about that because the potential is enormous.
How do you promote that?
Yeah.
How do you promote a physical offer like that?
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of different ways. So obviously there's social media.
Yeah.
There's different. So, believe it or not, there's dental influencers, right?
No shit.
Yeah, there's like whole YouTube channels which are all about like the latest and greatest electric toothbrush. Does this product work? Is this tooth whitening thing effective? And it's a whole industry. So you can promote it through people like that. You could also obviously pay for advertisements. You can get into stores, into retailers. So there's different vectors to do physical products like that.
Interesting. I was going to say that would have been my first idea, but I always, people often ask me about physical products, and I'm like, it's not my expertise. We do digital products. I've always been selling coaching, consulting, anything that doesn't cost money to source.
Yeah, that's a lot easier to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. But as a thought experiment, I would have thought like, probably social media, maybe make an account about dental hygiene and so on and so forth, and go there. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's actually really, really crazy to think. Your entire story is such a beautiful American dream story, like the comeback story. The thing is, like, you were the victim here. You got fucked over.
Right.
And then, so first you get fucked over by your business partner. Then you get fucked over by the government for saying they're not going to charge you, and they do charge you, and so on and so forth. How did you not turn bitter and just fall in victim mentality, but instead, the way you told the story is like, that was actually great, and I saw the opportunity in it, and then I fucking used it to my advantage.
Right.
I think there would have been a certain subsection of people out there that would have just turned fucking bitter,
right,
and not get back up on their feet.
Right.
What was the factor for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not to say I was like cheery and happy-go-lucky the whole time. There was quite a few years there where I was very depressed and terrified. I thought I might spend years in prison. Like, even though, the government can, agreed to, after I signed the plea agreement, the maximum I could get was 5 years legally, but I could still get 5 years.
Well,
right?
they could have still given it to
They
you
can still
after the house arrest?
Yes.
They could have been like...
Oh, no. The house arrest was the sentencing.
Okay.
Before I got sentenced. So I got sentenced. So we got charged in 2008, right after the New York Times article came out. But we only got sentenced in 2011.
Okay. So there was these 3 years.
There was 3 years where I was in limbo. Yeah. And I couldn't leave the Southern District of Florida. I couldn't leave Miami. I couldn't get into government contracting business. I couldn't do the arms business, of course. And I was terrified of like accidentally committing a crime, and invalidating my plea agreement. So I was constantly living under that fear of like, I can't fuck up. Like if I get, if I got busted for drunk driving, or something like that, like that could invalidate my plea agreement, and now I can get years in prison. So it was a very, very stressful time in my life, and at the same time had to support my child, and I was broke. So it was an enormous amount of stress. So I'm not saying that I was just like, nothing happened there. I'm just, moving on. Eventually, after a few years, I think, first of all, the house arrest was an enormous relief for me. So for me, being sentenced to just house arrest and managing to avoid prison, I felt that's a blessing. I got lucky. So I was actually thrilled to get house arrest. I wasn't bitter about it at all. I was like, I'm not going to prison. This is the best fucking possible outcome. And I got it. It's house arrest, but it's not such a big deal. Compared to what the alternative was. So by the time I was sentenced to house arrest, I was already like, this is an enormous weight off my shoulders. And when I had the idea for the BeatBuddy, I instantly knew that this was going to be a successful product. Like, I knew right away. I didn't know for sure it was possible to build for the price that it needed to be, right? That's always a question because I'm not like an engineer. And anyway, even like I was studying mechanical engineering, but not nearly enough to do this product by myself. And you need more than just mechanical engineering. You need electrical engineering and software engineering and all that.
Yeah.
And so I knew that if we could make the product at a price that people would afford to be able to buy it, it was going to be a best-selling product because I wanted it so bad for myself.
Yeah.
And every musician I talked to wanted it really bad for themselves. Now, there was a disagreement of how much people were willing to spend. Every musician I talked about it to, I would ask them, well, how much would you be willing to pay for it? And some people would say, I wouldn't pay more than $100. Other would be like, oh, I'd pay $1,000 for that. That's awesome. You know? So it was an enormous range. Yeah. Enormous range. The price actually ended up being what we charge for it now is $379. So it's kind of in between that. And that seems to be the sweet spot. It's enough that we can make a profit and continuing operating as a company, but it's not so high that it's too cost prohibitive for what it is, what people get out of it. So I knew that it was going to be successful. I was, of course, and so I was super excited. I was like, oh, this could be like a way to redeem myself. Yeah. You know, because at the time, like, I felt like I was a failure. You know, like my family, my parents are very religious. My dad was a rabbi. That's why they have 9 kids. And so, you know, in their minds, it's like, and I was like one of the first kids out of the 9, I'm third from the oldest, to become not religious. And so they were using me as an example of this is what happens when you leave the religion and you don't follow the path of God, you become a criminal, you know, you get your life destroyed. So like I had a lot to prove. I was like, I need to like, you know, make something of my life and you know, redeem myself in, you know, my parents' eyes, but also in my own eyes and my kids' eyes, you know, like I can't be this loser who, you know, just fucked up for the rest of my life. So I had a big motivator there to do something. And when I thought of the BeatBuddy, I was like, man, this could be it. You know, this could be it. If this thing works, then this could be my ticket. And it has been. I was extremely, extremely lucky that I had that idea at that time and that I managed to make it work and to get the right people to build it and to manufacture it. And it became a massive best-selling product. I've met like very famous musicians who use the product. Yeah. So one of my favorite bands, I grew up in the 90s. So I grew up learning to play guitar, all the grunge era bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam, Smashing Pumpkins and Alice in Chains. And it was actually this in 2015, I think this happened, either 2015 or 2016, where I was at a trade show. It was actually the biggest musical products trade show in the world called NAMM for musicians. They know what that is. It's in California every year. And this guy came up to me and he's like, oh, I recognize you from the videos. You're the BeatBuddy guy. And I'm like, yeah. And he says, I'm Mike Inez. I'm the bassist from Alice in Chains. Oh, shit. He's like, I just bought one of your BeatBuddies 2 months ago. I've been using it on the road. I've been composing all my new music with it. I'm like, dude, I learned to play guitar listening to your music. Oh, my God, man. So it was so cool. I'm like, you know, like I learned to play guitar listening to his music, and now he's writing new music with my product. So it was just super, super cool. And when they came to Miami, I got backstage passes, got to meet the band. Dude, yeah, it was super cool. Yeah.
Damn, yeah. That alone was the whole journey.
Absolutely.
It's so funny. I'm currently writing a YouTube video for my other YouTube channel, and that's kind of like advice for guys in their 30s.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I wrote down in my notes that I want to talk about is don't turn bitter.
Yeah,
because I feel like it's such an easy thing, as specifically as a man in your 30s. You're growing up through your 20s. you got nothing to your name. The average the average man in his 20s got nothing to his name.
Right.
There's all the girls in his age go for the older guys.
Right.
All the girls that are younger go for the older guys.
Right.
You got nothing for you. You're not being respected. You have to earn everything.
Sure.
It's very different for the equivalent of a girl. Is you're a pretty girl in your 20s, everything will be at your feet.
Right. If you're not a pretty girl, you got nothing. Exactly. That's rough. That's the roughest of all the worlds.
But to be fair, even if you're not a pretty girl, you still got a lot of simps that know they can't get any better.
True.
But as a guy, you got nothing. You got to completely prove yourself. People fuck you over. People will take advantage of you. You're going to be mistreated, especially if you don't have money. When I told you earlier off microphone, when I was traveling, when I was touring, the first 1 to 2 tours, I didn't make a lot of money, if anything at all. And I really understood how people fucking treat you when they know you're broke. They treat you like you don't fucking exist because they get nothing out of you.
Right.
So that accumulates over 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
A lot of guys in their 30s, they arrive in their 30s bitter, disempowered, feeling like the entire world is against them.
Right.
But there's a subsection of men that take a lot of fucking action in their 20s. Or another subsection is they didn't take a lot of actions in their 20s, but then they wake up in their 30s and then they start taking action. And they all have this one thing in common. They don't allow themselves to be bitter, even though they were the victim. They got fucked over, and they did nothing wrong other than maybe inaction.
Right.
And it's such a key point to learn, especially for men, surely for women as well. But I'm a man, so I can relate more to men.
Right.
So specifically as a man, it's so fucking key to not turn bitter and keep going, keep pushing, even though you fail once, 2 times, 3 times, and so on and so forth, because you got nothing else.
Absolutely.
And it's specifically this one point you mentioned about your kids where you kind of realize, like, I can't have my kids think I'm a loser or my family. That's another point. Like, we own the pressure. Absolutely. Sure, the mom owns the pressure a little bit as well, but in a different way. We own the pressure of, I got to take care of my kids.
That's true.
And we got to learn how to live with that pressure, or again, just fucking lose in life in general.
Right.
As a man, I feel like the pressure only becomes more. The last time we had no pressure, and the last time we will have no pressure is in fucking school, maybe.
Right.
If anything.
Yeah.
Or before that.
Yeah.
The rest is just like, you're going to have a life full of pressure. You're going to have a life full of you needing to prove yourself. You're going to have a life full of you needing to prove that you're worthy of recognition, of love, of anything.
True.
I didn't make the game. That's the rules of the fucking games.
Yeah.
You can either opt out of the game and become an incel and live at home and, like the red-pilled folks, like, everybody sucks, or you fucking win the game.
Right.
You say, fuck it, I'm going to put in the fucking work, I'm going to go win. And you're certainly someone who did win it, and you keep winning, which is fucking fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
My question is, when you then started the War Dogs Academy, did you have to check any legalities of like, hey, like, I wonder if the government's going to be fine with that? Like me teaching this, how was the process there?
So I'll tell you how the War Dogs Academy started.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, when I got sentenced, part of my sentencing, besides the house arrest, was that I was banned from doing government contracting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'll go back a little bit because you asked me before about how Efraim got to keep the money.
That's right. That's right.
So we didn't get back to that. When they charge you with fraud, usually they sentence you to punish you for the committing the fraud, and they usually ask you to make restitution to the victim. Right? Restitution, you have to pay back the victim.
Yeah.
Who lost the money. That is based on how much money the victim lost.
But because you guys underbid for $50 million, they didn't lose much?
Not that they not lose anything. They would have made $50 million if they had allowed us to continue defrauding. Right? So the only loss that they can claim was the cost of them taking the contract away from us and having to rebid it out.
Oh, that's funny.
And and I'm sure it was exaggerated, but they estimated that cost was $350,000. So that was the only restitution that we had to make.
Yeah.
So now the way the restitution goes with when it's a group of people who commit fraud together is whoever has the capacity to pay back pays back. So Efraim had all the money because he didn't pay me back. And he also ended up screwing Ralph out of all his money.
Classic, of course.
Yeah, Ralph put $1.5 million of his own dollars into the business, and not only did Efraim not give him the profits, he didn't even give him the principal. He didn't even give him his $1.5 million back. Ralph went bankrupt because Efraim stole all his money, and all the rest of the money he had went on defending himself in court. He ended up losing. He also got sentenced to 4 years.
Oh, yeah. As the investor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's even worse.
Yeah. So Efraim had to pay $350,000 in restitution, and he got to keep. I think I estimated that he made about between $15 and $20 million on the contract before they got canceled. So he got to keep all that money except for $350K. But yeah, so that's how that's
a good deal.
Yeah. I mean, he ended up going to 4 years in prison, but I think.
But 4 years in prison, you come out,
he's still miserable.
Well, was he able to?
Miserable.
Because of other issues,
right?
Was he able to put that somewhere so it grows at least during those 4 years?
I have no idea what he did with it. He didn't tell me what he was doing with his money. Yeah. I do know that he had overseas bank accounts, like in the Seychelles Islands.
Classic, yeah. Okay.
So I'm sure he's got money hidden away somewhere, away from the IRS or whoever's looking for it.
Yeah.
But I don't know what he's done with his money. I know he tried to do a whole bunch of different businesses. Maybe he lost a bunch of money. So I don't know what he's gotten now. But I do know that he's still screwing people left and right, because occasionally I get phone calls from people who've been the victim.
Yeah.
But yeah. So back to War Dogs Academy. So ever since the movie, so when I got sentenced, I got banned from doing government contracting.
Yeah.
So that's I had been so traumatized by the whole government contracting industry. I was like, I don't even want anything to do with this. I'm just focusing on BeatBuddy and making products and inventing things, and which I really love doing anyway. So I wasn't even motivated to do it, but I wasn't even legally allowed to do it. I just got off the banned list just last year. Actually.
Oh, no
shit.
Yeah,
so I can do it again legally. But I hadn't done it in 15 years. Ever since the movie came out, War Dogs came out in 2016, I had literally thousands of people contact me on social media.
Oh, that's funny.
And they're like, please teach me how to do government contracting. I'll do it for free. You can make 90% of the profit. People begging me, literally.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not, first of all, my information might be a little out of date. I haven't done it in fucking years. And, I'm busy, I'm not doing this. So I pretty much, I gave people a link. They can go learn themselves, but I doubt many people did, because it's not easy to learn government contracting. It's pretty technical, pretty hard to learn it on your own. So then about a year ago, I had this guy named Logan contact me on, I think it was on Instagram. And he told me, he was like, hey, I just want you to know that 6 years ago, my partner James and I, we were 21 years old and we were dead broke picking bananas on a farm in Australia, because they would been traveling in Thailand. They ran out of money. They heard Australia paid well for agricultural workers. So they went there to make some money so they can continue traveling. And the farm had a movie night and they showed War Dogs. And they thought to themselves, wow, if these guys can do it and they're our age, why can't we do that? So they got obsessed with it and they ended up teaching themselves how to do the business. And they bid on a whole bunch of contracts. They managed to win a small laundry services contract on some army base. And then they won a bigger laundry services contract and a bigger one. And 6 years later, they have a multi-million-dollar government contracting business. They mainly specializes in laundry services. They have laundry service contracts all over the world. They're flying to Europe to, arrange their deals. And they said, and they're doing really, really well. And Logan reached out to me. He's like, I just want to reach out and say thank you for the inspiration. If it wasn't for War Dogs, we would have never been where we are today. And I told him, I have a lot of people who are asking me to teach them how to do this, and my info is a little out of date. But you guys are as up to date on this as possible because you have active multi-million-dollar contracts right now and you're bidding on new ones. So why don't we start something together where we can teach people how to do government contracting? Because there's not many things like that out there. It's not a very well-known field. Even though government contracting is one of the biggest industries in the world, the U.S. government spends $7 trillion every year.
Yeah.
7 trillion with a T, right? So that's 7,000 billions. So it's insane, which is which is like twice the amount of money they were spending back when I was doing it. The budget just goes up every year.
Even with inflation, it's way more.
It's way more. They're spending way more money.
And that was already after you got unbanned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we started but it's even the ban doesn't have to do with teaching.
Okay.
Yeah, the ban is just on bidding on stuff.
It specifies you can teach it. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's not. There's no ban against teaching it.
Got it.
As long as I'm teaching people to do things legally.
Yeah. Oh, which I am. Okay.
So we created a whole course on how to go from like zero to hero with government contracting, and we just launched it a few months ago, and I think we're up to 60 students so far have successfully won a government contract.
Nice.
Who've actually made money.
Yeah.
So it's. I told them when we first started doing this, I'm like, guys, we have to build something real here where people are actually going to be successful. It can't just be a flash in the pan. It can't be a scam.
Yeah.
Because I already have a conviction for fraud. I can't get another one. The judge won't go easy on me next time.
Yeah.
So it has to be something real. And of course, we're going to make way more money if it's real. And one of the things we're really excited about in expanding the business is we recently just made a deal with a financing company. Because the government only pays you 30 days after you deliver. And so someone who's just getting started in this business, usually you have to pay the suppliers before they ship. So you need to finance that gap of before they ship, during the shipping process, and 30 days after you deliver, you need to be able to pay for those goods that you're selling to the government. If you don't have that money, even if you win the contract, you're not going to make any money. You're going to fail. So we made a deal with a financing company to fund our students' contract.
Oh, sweet.
So, of course, we get a little percentage of that.
Yeah.
So the more our students win, the more money we're going to win too.
That is so sick.
So we have not just an online course, we have a whole support system that we built. We have a forum where people can talk to each other and ask questions and interact and make business connections. But we also hired a few retired government contracting officers, people who need to work for the government, deciding who wins the contracts. Now they work for us and they guide our students through the whole process.
Damn.
So anyone who has any questions, or they also review their proposals before they submit it to the government to make sure they did everything correctly. And we have twice a week, we have live question and answer sessions with our founders and as well as the government contracting experts, so that everyone can learn from everyone else's questions. And I think that's a major component of why so many of our students have been able to successfully win government contracts, is because we built this support system in place. And so really excited where it's going. It's done amazingly well, way better than we thought it would when we just first launched it. And now we're actually just getting into the B2B offering, where
sweet,
because we've had a few big companies contact us. They're like, we are really competitive manufacturing. We've never sold to the government. We don't want to spend the months of one of our employees' time to learn this stuff. Can you just do this for us?
Yeah.
Do the registration, bid on the contracts we can supply. And so now we're starting to do more B2B stuff, and at a higher ticket item, of course. But big companies, they have no problem.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, because they're just going to make money. So yeah,
it's so cool that the thing you mentioned, that you guys win when your clients win. You now have a direct incentive apart from, we just want to get good results.
Right.
We want to have good testimonials for marketing. You have a direct incentive to make the money, because you're making a little bit as well.
Exactly.
It's really interesting. I had the guys from WAP on. And their entire, so WAP is a payment processor, plus they're adding a bunch of features. They're just they want to become the everything app of the US. Great guys.
Okay, cool.
You should hang out with them at some point. I can connect you. Great guys. They're based in New York. New York.
Oh, New York.
They have a huge office. They just doubled their office, and then
cool.
we'll double it again. They have 70 employees right there.
Amazing.
And they get like 70 more until the end of the year.
Oh, wow.
They're insane. And anyways, and what they're doing is they're also they always said, look, no matter how good your intentions are, no matter how good the plan is, unless you have the exact same incentive as your clients, And also, unless your employees have the exact same incentive as you have, it's not going to work, or at least not as well.
Absolutely.
So what they're doing is like everybody gets a share of everything.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Very smart.
Super sick. So like they make money when their clients make money. They make more money when their clients make more money. And so on and so forth. So it's a really, really awesome system. And I'm thinking about that. Like it's been in my mind ever since. It was like 2 weeks ago. I'm like, how can I implement this as well?
Right.
It's really cool to hear that from you again.
Yeah.
Regarding the movie, how did that come to be? Did you all of a sudden get a call and we're like, so we got Miles Taylor here. You want him to play you? Well, how did that go?
No, exactly. So the way the movie happened was after the New York Times article came out and created an enormous scandal, I pretty much had every journalist in the world trying to call me. And my lawyer told me, don't talk to any of them. You're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And so then I had a journalist from Rolling Stone call me and leave a voicemail. And I was like, man, I'm a musician, that's Rolling Stone. I called him back and I'm like, hey, listen, my lawyer told me I can't talk to any journalists, but it's always been my dream to be written about in Rolling Stone, just not necessarily for whatever reason, And he goes to me, he's like, hey, I used to, the journalist, his name is Guy Lawson. He's like, I used to be a lawyer too before I became a journalist. Let me talk to your lawyer. Maybe we could work something out. He talks to my lawyer and he gives him a guarantee he won't publish anything until all legal jeopardy has passed.
Oh, sick.
And so my lawyer says, okay, fine. He made that agreement. You can talk to him. So I gave an interview to Guy Lawson. He also interviewed Efraim briefly before Efraim decided to stonewall and because Efraim wanted to do his own thing. And Guy Lawson went and interviewed a whole bunch of people, like on the government side, and got like the whole, the whole inside scoop. It did a really in-depth investigative journalistic piece.
That's actually good.
Yeah,
it's rare.
Yeah. It's very rare. So because Ralph went to trial, we got all the internal emails from the government. That's actually how we found out. I forgot to say this. That's how we found out that after the Justice Department raided our office, they sent an email to the U.S. Army informing them that the stuff they were taking delivery on was Chinese. And they said, you may want to stop taking delivery on this. And the Army emailed them back and said, this ammunition is critical to the mission in Afghanistan. And if you want us to stop taking delivery on it, we need a letter from the Attorney General of the United States, who's the head of the Justice Department, instructing us not to take delivery on it.
Wow.
And that letter never came. So they kept on taking delivery on it. So for another 6 months, knowing in writing that this is Chinese ammo, they kept on taking delivery, kept on paying for it. And this all came out in Ralph's trial. So Guy did a whole investigative piece. And because he wasn't allowed to publish until all our legal jeopardy was passed, and that took 3 years, he had a lot of time to do investigations. And by the time it got published in 2011, the Rolling Stone article, it was one of the longest articles they'd ever published.
Wow.
And that article was read by Todd Phillips, who was director of the Hangover movies.
Oh,
and after Hangover, he did War Dogs.
Yeah,
decided to make War Dogs, and then after War Dogs, he did the Joker movies. So he did Joker 1 and 2. Yeah, Todd Phillips. So so he loved the story. He was like, oh, this is a great story. I could make a great movie out of it. And he was doing The Hangover at the time. Just like all his movies had been comedies at that point, and he wanted to get into more serious movies. So like War Dogs was his like transition.
Yeah, it's kind of like
it's between. They call it a dramedy.
Oh, okay,
drama comedy, and then of course Joker, ironically, was not very funny. So that was like his full on drama movie. So he decided to make a movie, and so the way it works is they bought the rights to the article to base the movie on the article, and they also bought my life rights, they call it. Now, they didn't have to do this, actually. So the way it works in the United States, because of the freedom of speech amendment, is that if you are a public figure, meaning that your name has appeared in public media, like newspapers or TV or whatever, anyone can make a piece of art about you, a movie, a play, or a book, whatever.
Even with the real name?
With your real name.
Wow.
Because you're a public figure. And they could say whatever they want about you.
Oh, fuck.
And you can't sue them. Yeah, in the United States, that's how it works. There's very strong freedom of speech. That way you could make parodies. Like there's a movie that just came out about Trump,
Oh, no shit.
Like, yeah, it's not flattering, and so, he's screaming about suing them. He's going to lose. It's freedom of speech. So, yeah, I mean, so they didn't have to pay me a penny. They didn't have to get my permission. They could have used my real name and said whatever they wanted about me. But because they wanted it to be based on a true story, they wanted to have my cooperation. So they offered to buy my life rights, which is the rights to my life story, as it relates to that.
Could they still call it based on a real story?
Yeah, they could say that.
Okay,
they just wanted it to be a little bit more authentic.
Oh, well, that's nice.
So they didn't have to. They just they thought it would be a better movie if it was a bit more authentic.
Yeah.
So they wanted my cooperation, and that's why they were willing to buy my life rights. Not nearly as much money as they gave the guy pretending to be me. Miles Teller got a lot more money pretending to be me than I got for being me. But that's how it goes.
How much did he get? Do you know?
I have to assume in the millions.
Okay.
I have to assume. I did not make in the millions.
Okay.
Yeah, it was quite less than $1 million.
What was it, 6 figures?
It was 6 figures. It was a few $100K, but which is not nothing, But
I'll take that.
Yeah, I'm not complaining. Just a little complaining. I would have liked to have made as much. I would have loved to play myself. Yeah, hell yeah. Did they ask you that? Was that a tail? That was not an option. They gave me part of the life rights agreement. Is they're very clear. You get zero control, zero artistic input. They were very clear that I could give my opinion, but they are not required whatsoever to follow any of my suggestions. So the screenwriter, Stephen Chin, he came to Miami to interview me for like a week. Did very in-depth interviews, recorded all the interviews, and then he based the first version of the screenplay on those interviews. But then Todd Phillips and another screenwriter, Jason Smilovic, they rewrote the screenplay like 10 times over the course of a year, 10 different. I saw different versions of it. So it was very interesting to see like how it evolved and how they iterated on it. Like the original screenplay was way closer to how it actually happened. By the time they got to the end, it was a lot more of a formulaic Hollywood movie.
Yeah. Classic, yeah.
Which I understand. I mean, they're making a big budget movie. They spent $40 million to film this thing. They need to be sure they're going to make that money back.
Yeah.
That's why big budget Hollywood films tend to be pretty consistent in their structure and length and style.
Yeah.
They have to have a certain amount of drama, a certain amount of comedy, a certain amount of, action. And that's why they had, so people always ask me like, what was real in the movie? What was fake? One of the first things people always ask me is whether the Triangle of Death scene was real.
I was gonna ask that.
I knew you were gonna, because that's the first thing people always ask. And the funny thing about that is that it actually is based on a true story.
Oh, no shit.
But it wasn't our story.
Okay.
So it actually did happen, but it happened to the screenwriter, Stephen Chin.
No way.
So Stephen Chin, who he's an American, Asian American guy, lives in California. He was a journalist, and then he wanted to get into writing screenplays. This is back in like 2004, 2005, I think. And he wanted to write a screenplay about these other two American contractors who were actually on the ground in Baghdad at the time. And in order to write that screenplay, he wanted to go and meet them and see what their operation was like. But he couldn't get a commercial flight into Baghdad, right? Because it was a war zone. And so he flew into Jordan, and he hired a Jordanian driver to drive him to Baghdad. The Jordanian driver decided he wants to stop in Fallujah to get some cheap gas. And they got shot at by insurgents and got saved by the U.S. Army, and that whole thing actually happened to him.
And did he say he was driving through the Triangle of their moms as well?
No, I don't think. I think that was Jonah Hill original. But I drive through all triangles, including your moms. Yeah. But no, but he did get shot at by insurgents, and So when he was writing the screenplay, Todd Phillips was like, "These guys are in an office too much. We need more action in this film. Why don't you put your story in?"
Yeah.
So there was a Beretta deal, but we actually did not end up delivering on that deal because we didn't drive through the Triangle of Death. But yeah, so like another example of how they changed the film was in the film. They have like my girlfriend,
played by the super hot actress Anna
de Armas. Yeah.
Did you get to meet her?
I did meet her.
Hell yeah.
She's just as beautiful in real life.
Did you get to
Hey, we need to. That's not if that's what you're asking.
No,
you know you're playing, Michael. It has to be.
Yeah, you have to be. It has to be realistic, right? Got to get into character. You use, what do they call that? There's like a method swing it.
Are you into method acting?
She wasn't that into it. She wasn't that into it, unfortunately. But it was funny actually when I met Anna. She's a very nice girl and she's very beautiful, like in real life as well. It's actually funny. When I met her, she asked me, she's like, David, they gave me this like really dark spray tan. I told them they're giving me this way dark spray tan. Was your like ex-girlfriend, was she like this dark? And I told her, well, my ex-girlfriend was half African, so she's a little darker.
I love how you nailed her accent too pretty well.
Yeah, she's like half Cuban, half Spanish.
Yeah, something.
So yeah. In interviews, they said that she didn't speak English at the time, or but that's not true. She spoke to me in English.
Yeah.
She spoke to me in English. So I don't know. Yeah. So anyway, and so during the movie, they have her like they have Miles Teller, me, lying to her about the business, and it becomes this big like a relationship drama. In real life, my ex-girlfriend knew the whole time. She had no problem with it. Her line was, as long as you're bringing back some fucking money, that was what she cared about. As long as I was bringing in the money, she didn't care what I was doing. She knew everything I was doing. There was no relation. That type of relationship drama never occurred.
That's funny,
but when they're making a big budget Hollywood film, they know this is going to be, because it's about web.
There has to be relationship.
It has to be relationship stuff, because it's going to be mostly guys who go to the film because it's a guy movie, because it's guns, and they're going to drag their girlfriends along, and the girlfriends like the relationship drama.
Yeah, they do,
and that's what appeals to them. So they need to throw a bone, so to speak, to the girls.
Smart though.
Yeah. And that's how they design Hollywood films. They look at their audience segment, and they have to give enough of a interest to each potential segment of the audience. And that's why big budget Hollywood films become somewhat formulaic.
They're like vanilla.
Because they all have to appeal to the widest segment of the population.
100%.
Yeah, so they become a little into that formula.
Yeah, it makes sense. They want to make money. Now,
exactly.
We have to wrap up soon in a bit. Did you get to meet Jonah Hill and Miles Teller as well?
Yeah, I met them a few times actually.
No shit.
Yeah, because I have a little cameo in the film.
Really?
Yeah. If you watch it again, you'll see me. You'll notice me now. It's like 3 seconds.
Don't even tell me. I want to see it. I want
the first 5 minutes of the film.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We're gonna watch it for sure again, especially after knowing the real story.
You'll see.
So you met them
a very handsome bald dude.
Okay.
Good notice.
You met them a bunch of times. Yeah. Like, was on the premiere or?
Yeah. So I met Miles Teller when I was doing my the cameo for that scene, which I won't tell you. But I met him because he was in that scene too. So I met him when we were doing that scene together.
Yeah.
And then when they came to film in Miami, because they filmed in like 4 different places around the world. They filmed in LA, I think in Morocco, which they pretended was Iraq. They filmed in Bulgaria, which they pretended was Albania.
Yeah.
So then they filmed in Miami, which was actually Miami. And so when they came to Miami, they invited me to go on set a whole bunch of times. So I got to, So I saw a few different scenes, them filming the scene. There's one scene that was very cool to see. It was a scene where they're in a club, and Miles and Jonah are in a club, and they're like, and Dan Blazarian, Jonah hits on some girl,
and then Dan punches.
Yeah, Dan Blazarian punches him. So I was there for that scene when they filmed it. And the cool thing about that scene is that they're yelling over the music and everyone's dancing. In real life, when they film that scene, there's no music.
That's funny.
Because they want to record the voices clearly.
Yeah.
So everyone is dancing to silence, and they are yelling at each other, like as if they're yelling over the music, but it's completely silent. Everyone's dancing to silence, and they're yelling over as if they're, and then they add the music in the background later. So it was just so fucking bizarre. It was pretty cool to see how they make these, how they make films. But it's like the reality of them actually, when they film that scene and the way it comes out on the screen, completely different.
Always is.
When they're filming like a conversation, they have the shot of like where you see the guy and then they switch to the other guy. And if you think about where the camera has to be to shoot the other guy,
of course,
it would be in the shot.
Yeah.
So every conversation they have to do it twice. One from his perspective, one from his perspective, then they splice it together.
Oh shit.
So every conversation of that kind of type in movies, it's never like that in real life. It's like literally just like little bits and pieces. And they like, that's why they say movies are made on the editing room floor.
Yeah.
It's in the editing room, is they all splice it all together.
Kind of like Instagram videos. Kind of like we're doing it often too. Yeah, interesting. David, your stories was super, super duper inspirational.
Thank you.
I could tell you and I could talk for hours.
Yeah.
Let's do it again when I'm back in Miami. I'd be super happy to have you on.
Yeah.
And I hope we can inspire so many people out there that are going through hard times right now, that have grandiose plans for their life. And obviously, the War Dogs Academy sounds really fucking awesome.
Yeah.
How can people find you? How can they check your stuff out? What's your Instagrams?
So my Instagram is David Packouz, Packouz. War Dogs Academy is War Dogs Academy on Instagram, YouTube, wardogsacademy.com if you want to check out the website. Singular Sound is my music company for all the musicians in the audience.
Hell yeah.
And instafloss.com, like Instagram, but flossing, instafloss.com if you are interested in maintaining your beautiful oral hygiene.
Let's go.
For 10 seconds a day. So
beautiful.
Tell your friends.
Check it out. I might get one, actually. It's very cool.
Everyone should get one. Everyone needs to floss. Everyone hates it.
Because I floss every fucking day. And I'm like, your one was much faster than that. See, that's
10 seconds. 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's actually more effective than string floss because it gets under the gum lines. It gets rid of the bacteria.
That's the one thing that sold me on it. For sure. Man, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much. We're going to put everything in the description below, and GG. What an amazing story of David. I've been meaning to talk to this guy for so long, ever since I watched the movie War Dogs. I've been so blessed to have him on the podcast. And a lot of folks reach out to me all the time saying, Max, you're talking to all these entrepreneurs, all these folks are traveling the world, making money. This is so awesome. How can I do that? Well, ask no longer, because we've actually implemented an AI system. It's a stack of AI systems that can help you start, build, automate, and run 80% of your entire business, even if you're a complete beginner. We've been testing this for my own business for the last couple months. We've been rolling this out for our existing clients, and the results have been off the fucking hook. It's been absolutely insane. This has completely revolutionized the way people build brands, monetize brands, and start online businesses, especially in the coaching, consulting, and service providing realm. So if you want to know more, if you want to get in on this, book a call with us. The call is entirely for free. It's no pressure whatsoever. It's literally just there for us to answer you all the questions that you might have about what you can get started, where you can get your first clients, how can you tap into this AI system that we've been building, and so much more. It's literally entirely for free. maxtornow.com/call is the URL. The link is down in the description below as well. So talk soon, and let's make awesome things happen. It's never been easier to start and build and automate your business. Never been easier. If you can't do it right now, you're not going to do it ever. So talk to you very, very soon. Cheers.